Hello, hi. Good morning to all, or good afternoon, depends on where you are. So thank you to MAEW 2021 for the opportunity to speak here today on the land grabbing issue happening in ASEAN. So today I'll be representing SUARAM to talk on that issue. And it's nice to be here and also share my view among the other speakers. So I'll be doing a presentation. Let me share my screen. Okay, hope all can see my screen. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay, good. Okay, so I'll start with my first slide. Okay, my name is Suresh, as I said before. I'm currently a program coordinator with the People Before Profit. That's the desk in SUARAM. So we are looking after basically all the issues regarding people, environment, and also indigenous people in Malaysia. So land grabbing in Malaysia is happening. I can classify that for 4 communities in Malaysia. The first one is the Orang Asli, the indigenous communities, which is living in the West Malaysia or the peninsula of Malaysia. And the second one is the land grabbing happening against the Sabah and Sarawak communities, the indigenous people living in Sabah and Sarawak, or the East Malaysia, the Borneo part of the Malaysia. We call them Pribumi in Malay language. And also the third community is the small farmers. Their lands also are being taken away, and also the urban settlers that who was in the urban area, who started to move to expand the urban areas. They are also the land that belongs to their houses or their small farms are being grabbed. But today I'll be speaking about the land grabbing happening among the Orang Asli communities in West Malaysia, the Peninsula Malaysia, because that's the community that I have been working with for the past about 20 years. So in Peninsular Malaysia, we have about 18 main tribes of Orang Asli. I'll call them OA in short form. So if you can see the peninsular map of Malaysia, those are the demographics of the 18 tribes. So that's how they are populated, you know. And so from north to the south, we have Orang Asli, and at the south we have the tribe which is seafarers. Okay, but the rest of the tribes who lives in the jungle and utilize the jungle. So the picture credit is the picture is from Malaysia Kini. It's a online news portal in Malaysia. I'll move on. Okay, so in the year of 2020 and 2021, this year, where Malaysia had about 45% days of the year under various MCOs, movement control orders, we see rampant of land grabbing happening. So this is the period where economic and all activities are frozen, you know, because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But then it's not for the land grabbers and also for the policymakers. Why I'm saying so? If you see at the right hand side of my slide, there are list of land grabbing that happened in 2020 and 2021. So I think I got about 8 cases there. So in all states in Malaysia, we have Kelantan, Perak, we have Pahang, Negeri Sembilan. So land grabbing is happening, even though it's MCO in Malaysia and we under the pandemic. And also during that 2 years period, we see the 3 proposals put forward by the state. Okay, so the first one is to build a dam, a hydroelectric dam. Second one is a mixed development in the state of Selangor. They want to clear a forest where it's ancestral land for the OAs, for a mixed development. And also the third one is a lanthanide mining, proposed lanthanide mining near one of the OA settlement in a state called Pahang. So that's what I'm saying, that even though it's an MCO and about half of the days we were our movements were restricted, we shouldn't indulge in economic activities, but then it's not happening for the land grabbers and policymakers. So the OA's ancestral lands are always being targeted, okay, either for logging, plantation, or mining. And also in the proposal, we see on a mixed development, okay. Okay, so these are some of the news regarding the land grabbing happening in Malaysia. So here I will start to explain why the land grabbing is happening in Malaysia. Okay, so Malaysia uses primarily a torrents title system. Okay, this is the land title system which is being adopted from Australia. So what's this torrents title system says? It says that the land registration and dealings is governed by the Register of Land Holdings, which comes under the purview of the state. Okay, so the state has an absolute power on the registration of the land and how to govern it. And this registration, the registry, is the primary source of the reference. That means everything goes back to this land registration. Okay, so it is the primary source and nothing else. And therefore, we have this concept called indivisibility of title, where the title is the king. So the title is the absolute ownership of the land. So if someone has the title, even though the land was by generations, by history, belongs to the OA, belongs to some other community, it is not taken into consideration because the title rules. The title is indivisibility, okay, of title, indefeatable. Yeah, the title is indefeatable. So that's the torrent system that's being used in Malaysia. So this is a book about the torrent system, and also we have articles about the indivisibility of title regarding torrent system in Malaysia. So the torrent system was introduced to Malaya by British. Malaysia was known as Malaya before this. So British introduced that in through the 1874 Pankau treatment, where the British started their administration in Malaya. So what it does was it doesn't recognize the statutory law that gives the recognition for the traditional system of recognizing a land. That means the torrent system doesn't really seize the previous system used by the Malays, by the OAs on recognizing their land. Okay, this is basically one of the reason is lack of understanding, and also the second reason is because these laws were conceptualized during the British colonial period. And British, during that time, it was trying to achieve an economic growth, through exploitation, taking away lands for mining and plantations. Okay, so they need the law where they can take the land without much hassle, so to achieve an economic growth. But also these lands, these plantations, these mines were source of income for the British Empire, which was sent back to Britain. I think that's how they rebuilt Britain after the World War II, by the money that was plundered from the empire, the British Empire everywhere else. So these lands like Malaya contributed in terms of the rubber plantation, contributed in terms of the tin mining. to build the British Empire. So how about the Orang Aslis, OA's ancestral land rights? So the OA's land rights is not recognized by law. But saying that, I need to admit that we have the common law from good judgments regarding this OA's ancestral land. Okay, but the problem is these common laws are not transpired to a written law. Okay, so these common laws are not transferred to a written law. So therefore, the common law exists as a common law in Malaysia. So the state governments holds the right to allocate their land, and it's based on their own discretion. Okay, and Orang Asli is not consulted regarding before giving out their land to a mining company, to a plantations, or for any other development purpose. For Orang Asli, the loss of their ancestral land is a kind of loss of identity, because their life is very much related to their ancestral land. If you look at the background of my slide there, that's one of the land grabbing that happened recently this year in a place called Klai in the state of Kelantan. So this is regarding the Orang Asli's ancestral land the land grabbing happening in the OA's ancestral land. Okay. So looking at state governments, they have the discretionary power over land and forest matters. Okay. So how do they get that? It is in the Schedule 9 of the Federal Constitution. So Federal Constitution says states have this power over land and forest, which is not a part of the federal government's law. So when there is a conflict between the OAs and the state, and the developer, after the land is being granted to the developer, so the state will try to mediate that between the OAs and the developer, and rarely the OA is favored by the state. It's always the developer which is granted with the license. That's because land is the only revenue. I mean, not to say only, but it's the main revenue for the states. They use land, they give out licenses, they give out the land clearing permits, the plantation permits, mining permits, and that's how the revenue comes into the state. And because of that, the state needs to give out the land lease, and because of that, the OA's ancestral land is affected. So this is also a flaw in the revenue system between the state and the federal. The federal government takes most of the revenue, and the state gets to hold a little of the revenue, and things like from the land matters. They get their revenues from the land matter, and therefore the state sometimes blindly give out lands, even though the lands is a OA's ancestral land. For forest reserves in Malaysia, we have forest categorized two types of forests: the protection forest and production forest. So forest reserves are not always reserves in Malaysia. That means you can still, developers can still come into the forest and develop the forest if it's a production forest. The only thing is when they develop the production forest, the regulations are tighter. That means there are more things need to be observed before you develop. And most forest reserves in Malaysia are production forests, which that means they can be developed. For an example, in the state of Kelantan, where there's a lot of OA's ancestral land disputes are, we observed that 90% of the reserves are production forests. So this itself shows that even though a forest is classified as forest reserves in Malaysia, and it is a part of the OA's ancestral land, it is not being guaranteed to be protected. It can still be developed. Another reason for the land grabbing happening in Malaysia among the OA's ancestral land is because of the vast power of the chief minister. In Malay, we call Menteri Besar. So the chief minister supposedly need to be guided by the National Land Code 1965. But then in most of the states where there is a conflict of OA's and the state, we observed that the chief minister is most likely to act on the short-term political gain. So the chief minister will try to reap financial rewards by giving out lands or mining or plantation lease to the party members, or to get support in the coming general elections to maintain his power as a chief minister. So that is the intention, and because of that, the OA's ancestral lands is affected. Another two post that also has a big say when allocating lands, or the cost of land grabbing in Peninsular Malaysia is the Director of Land and Mines that belongs to each state, and also the Director of State Forestry Department, which is also belongs to state. But sadly, these two posts is also heavily influenced by the chief minister. He decides who can be the directors, and also he decides the running of the officers. So it is not an independent post, even though these two posts have a big say. And also, as I said before, the OAs are not consulted in many of the land allocations. That means lands are being located without being the OAs being consulted, even though they had been living there for generation or for hundreds of years. Okay, when we see the Malaysian courts, the rules, the law says that the federal and state governments have a duty to protect the land rights of the Orang Asli. But what we observed is that the legal avenue is time consuming. It can take years, and it's not easy for the OAs, the indigenous people, to get a lawyer and to financially support their court case. You know, it's a big task for them to file a case, to seek a legal avenue to address their problem. They need to get a financial support. They need to get a good lawyers, and also if they can successfully do that, the case itself takes time. And during that time-consuming legal avenue, the state still can grant license, and the developer still can go and do the land clearing, land grabbing before the court decides. So we have a Human Rights Commission which have done many good tasks in protecting the OA's ancestral land from land grabbing, and also the judiciary given some good judgments. But the local authorities, the policymakers, they do not acknowledge the OA's claim on the ancestral lands, because, as I said, the indivisibility of the title, that plays a role. For the local authorities, for the policymakers, for them, the OAs doesn't own a title to verify their ownership on their ancestral lands, and therefore they don't have the rights to on the land. And as I said before, the common law is not transpired into a written law, and the policymakers, when they are making policies, they don't really refer to the common laws. They only refer to the written laws. So companies with licenses and so on, when they get the land and there is a conflict, there's a dispute among the companies, the land grabbing is happening, they are favored more by the authorities. For an example, the police or the forestry department. So when there is a conflict between the indigenous people and the police, and the developer. The police will side with the developer because the developer owns the title. And because of that, we see a lot of errors and detainment, harassment to the OA's rights defenders. That happened, I think, a few years ago, and keeps on happening. Even during the COVID period of time this year, some OAs were arrested while defending their land in Pahang. What I feel with the current method of protecting OA's ancestral land is kind of a firefighting, where the OA's being response to a disputes over land ownership. So whenever there is a dispute, then they go in to fight for their rights. This happens after the developers obtain their license, and most of the disputes goes to the court, and it's not always won by the
interrupt.
Yes.
We have 2 more minutes.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Always, the legal battles are not always won by the OAs.
បាទការតស៊ូផ្លូវច្បាប់ជាទូទៅ OA មិនបានទទួលជ័យជំនះទេ
So
មិនដែលឈ្នះរឿង
like
ក្តីទេ
what we feel in SUARAM is we need a long-term solution, and we have a few suggestions on that to prevent this land grabbing happening. The first one is we need a modification of the torrents title system, the kind of land allocation happening in the states in Malaysia, the Peninsula Malaysia. So what we believe is that the people who have interest in land must have legal rights and protections to ensure their continuous use or control over the land. That's not happening in the current torrent system. And also we believe there should be an oversight committee as a check and balance, and this committee should be composed of the oppositions in the state, the farming committee, the OAs, and many others who have interest. This committee should have a kind of a final decision, a final say whether a land allocation can be done or not. So with this committee, we believe that this land grabbing can be reduced. And also we believe the current National Land Code law, which is needs to be modified with the consultation between the state. And as I said, all these methods is a kind of a bottom-up empowerment where we empower the people, the OAs, to stop the land grabbing that's happening against their ancestral land. Okay, so we believe that we need to empower the OAs, and then while empowering the OAs, we can bring these kind of changes, the changes towards the torrents title system. And finally, 2 other things that can be also done as a long-term solution is the practice of having the common law as a written law for the policymakers. So they take into consideration of the judgments, good judgments given before, and also the major amendments which is more objective, which is more focused in the Aboriginal Peoples Act 1954. Now you have some good clauses, but it's quite subjective, and it defined separate, in different ways by the policymakers. So these are some of the long-term solutions that SUARAM thinks is possible to stop the land grabbing among the OAs in Malaysia. Thank you.